and walk you all through the NCS remote learning plan. In particular, I want to make sure that I reveal to you some of the links and some of the updates from prior meetings. So in the beginning of the doc, we talk about the goal, which is that we are now starting to switch to remote learning starting 420, which brings me to what's going to be happening this week. Um, During this week back from spring break, the assumption is that students are still working on their packets. So it's very important that you contact your students on your caseload. This may look different in secondary. I know at the middle school they've been working with their connections classes, and at the high school they've been working with their 7th hour. But it's really important this week to see that students are still working on their packet. In addition, it's very important to see if they're ready for remote learning. The parent letters did go out to the website back during spring break. However, we know that information may not have gotten to all families. So please make sure that all families review that letter, and please make sure that they're ready to switch to remote learning. And that will look different if you're an elementary friend or if you're a secondary friend. So the first section I want to walk through with you is the remote progression of learning. And again, remote learning is going to progress from 420 to 611. And really one of the first steps that we have to take in remote learning is really thinking about what is the critical content we want all students to know and be able to do in these 8 weeks. In particular, when might these standards be introduced? When might these standards be practiced? And in what weeks might these standards be assessed? So the first stack every team, department, grade level should be looking at is their power standards. So I go through a couple of examples in the doc. For elementary, if I'm a first grade student, 108.6 adding and subtracting within 20 is a critical standard. In high school, one of their power standards is working with trigonometric ratios. Most of us remember it as SOHCAHTOA. So really, one of our first steps when we're doing our remote learning planning is to think about what is that critical content that we want all students to know and be able to do. And for my K-8 friends, where you're going to be documenting that critical content is in this spreadsheet. And I've noticed that some of you were able to really power through some things on Friday. They kind of think through what it is that you wanted to focus on. And everybody's in different stages, and that's fine. Some groups, it was, just to get the first week was the first step for them. And other friends, it was easy to really kind of think through what those 8 weeks of instruction is going to look like. So on Friday, everybody got in different places, and that's perfectly fine. When you guys come back together again this week, you'll come back to this document if you're in K-8, and you'll start filling this in once again. For my 9-12 friends, you'll go back into your agenda and you were taking notes in there, and you will continue to take notes for what's the critical content that you want to hit during those 8 weeks of instruction. All right, so that kind of walks us through this idea of the progression of learning. If you're in elementary, again, we're just going to be focused on math and ELA. And in order to make best use of the resources that we have, we are going to be requiring that all assignments come from the Everyday Math journals and the Pearson Interactive journals for ELA. So all grade levels will be utilizing the same workbook pages, common assessments, etc. Teachers, however, within K-5 do have that flexibility to do their whole group, small group, and one-on-one instruction. That being said, I really encourage you all to work as a grade level to deliver some of those pieces. For example, some of you are really techie and you enjoy putting together the videos. I think it's the second grade team has a second grade YouTube page. So if you all want to work together to do your whole group, I encourage you to do that. Everybody's going to be having different schedules during this time. So maybe you have like one teacher to be available during a Google Hangout, or you switch it off during the different weeks. But get creative on how you can best utilize your team and the strengths within your team to deliver that content during each week. For my secondary friends, your situation is a little bit different for your courses. All courses must do the same content, and all courses must have the same common assessment. However, the weekly assignments that you give students is really up to you and how you want to do that each week. However, I do encourage you all to work smarter and not harder. And really think about how you all could collaborate to make it easier for you to deliver these courses collaboratively. This is going to take some heavy lifting, and I think what's cognitively difficult about this work is being able to deliver this remotely, to work with your students who aren't responding. So for my high school friends, I really encourage you guys to work together because I think it'll help you with the workload during this time. So let's go ahead now and talk about assessment and grading. This is something that's changed a little bit, in particular for my secondary friends. For my elementary friends, you will have credit, no credit, as we talked about. In order for a student to gain credit during this time, they just would need to submit one assessment each week. So if you're a K-5 student, you'll have an assessment in math and an assessment in ELA. We thought the best way to keep track of all those assignments would be in PowerSchool. So under math, you would have 8 columns, one for each week. And under ELA, you would have 8 columns, one for each week. And essentially, you're going to be giving credit or no credit. Again, the governor has said that we would, pass on any kid during this time, and that remote learning shouldn't penalize a student. However, if a student's not progressing, we should have already had those conversations back in the spring conferences. So if you had concerns about anybody not moving forward, my hope is that you've already started having that conversation with that parent. I encourage you during this first week back to go revisit some of those conversations with your parents and just remind them of some of the concerns that you have. Because in certain situations, particularly I think of some of my kindergarten friends, if they're not ready to advance, we don't want to use the closure as an excuse for them to move on when they're not ready. So again, we are giving credit, no credit. However, there might be certain situations, if you've already started having the conversation with a parent, that child, if it's in their best interest, may repeat a grade. And again, I'm referring mostly to my kindergarten friends. In 612, your situation looks a little bit different. We decided to change up the grading based on some information that we received from some of the other districts in Marion County. And we decided to make it a little bit more complex instead of credit, no credit. So one of the things that I encourage you to review, both on Monday and when you get into your PLCs, is the 612 remote learning grading system. So what we realized is we wanted to make sure that those students who still wanted the opportunity to earn an A or a B could still do that. And that any student that was having difficulty during this time could earn credit, and that no child would fail a class. They would receive an incomplete, and they would go about making up that credit at a later time. So I encourage you to go through and read this document very, very carefully. I think it does a nice job of balancing the needs of students during this difficult time. You'll also see in this document that we are going to close out third quarter grades, and students are going to have until 4/24 to do that. So for my secondary friends, if you have students this week, as you're making your phone calls, that haven't turned in any of their assignments, please make sure that you remind them to do so. Now, that being said, I do encourage you, if there are certain assignments at this point in time that you can excuse, you might want to go ahead and excuse those assignments, depending on a particular situation. But we are going to give our students the next 2 weeks to turn in any missing work so that we can go ahead and close out the third quarter grade. Then moving forward, the fourth quarter grade will either be an A, B, credit, or incomplete. When you all put your grades in Power School for each of the 8 assessments that you'll be giving, um, during remote learning, these are the grades that should also be going into your Power School grade book. So again, I should see, if I looked in your Power School, 8 columns, and it would either have an A, B, credit, or incomplete. You'll also notice when you get down to semester 2 that it is not possible, given any combination, that a student could fail the semester. Again, under the guidance of MDE and the government governor's requirement, we need to be working under no harm towards any of our students. So you'll notice there's no combination where a student would fail.